Hey everyone, George here, and today what I'd like to bring to you is a video about stacking. Stacking 202, Rule A5. We got thought bubbles. So this is a little bit more complicated than it appears to be. So we'll put up our thinking cap. I found my Blue Jays cap here. And let's go over a in-depth example of stacking. Now the first thing that we should cover before we go any further is what are stacking limits. So as much as I like that thought bubble, uh, you have to do some adjustments so you guys can see the best of the board. There are stacking limits, and there's one limit for multi-man counters and another limit for vehicles. Now, if you look at SK, for SK, the stacking limit is indeed a limit. For advanced squad leader, that is a limit that if you surpass, it will have consequences, negative consequences, other than firepower and shooting and whatnot. So for SK, you have a limit of up to 4 squad equivalents and up to 3 squad equivalents and 4 SMCs. And for vehicles, it is 1 per hex, period. And at no time can you surpass those limits. So the stacking limits and squad equivalents are defined in the glossary. And then the next item that pops up is under Rule 3.3. And it says units may move over and stack on top of friendly units, but may not move into a hex that would violate stacking limits at any time during the move. So at the advanced game, you have the stacking limits defined under Rule Alpha 5.1, 3 squad equivalents and 4 SMCs per hex per level, because you can have different buildings with different levels. And for vehicular stacking, it's defined as each side may move 1 vehicle per hex without penalty or risk. They can have each side can have 1 vehicle in a particular hex without surpassing the limit. And that's because in the advanced game, you can have vehicles in opposing players' hexes, and you can go through a hex that is occupied by an opposing vehicle. So how does that look like? Let's look at vehicles first. We have a couple of vehicles here, but we need some allied vehicles as well. So let's get the allied OB counter tray open, get a vehicle, and let's get a medium tank, a good old T-34 M40. Here you go. And let's clone this tank here. So basically in the advanced game, you can have 1 vehicle here, another vehicle there. They're both on opposing sides, but I can in fact move through you or into your hex. And at this point, neither player has violated the stacking limit. However, if I were to clone this, boink. Now the Russian player has violated the stacking limit by virtue of having 2 of his vehicles in the same hex as mine. But I am not overstacked. So that's how complicated it can get. That's why I have my little trusty Blue Jays hat on, king cap. Now, in terms of squad equivalents, here's a squad. And another squad equivalent would be 2 half squads or 2 crews. So let's clone this guy. Boom. And as a matter of fact, a crew or half squad with a AT gun or a gun is also a squad equivalent. All these guys are squad equivalents. We talked briefly about MMCs, but remember, 4 MMCs in addition to 3 squad equivalents. If you have 3 squad equivalents and 1 extra MMC over and above the 4 limit, then you're done for. So the other thing you need to know is that this stacking limit, as per the rule book, if I read it correctly, is per level. So this is a second 2-level building. So you got ground level. So let's go into that info section. There you go. This is not ground level, that's level 1. So lower, you got ground level. Clone, you got level 1. Let's clone again. And higher, you got level 2. So on the ground, on level 1 of this hex and level 2, you can have up to 3 squads. Let's clone them. And up to 4 SMCs. Check that out. The thought bubble, right there, is like cycling on its own. Yeah, interesting stuff. So here are my leaders. Let's clone this dude. And let's just demonstrate that. Clone, clone, and clone again. So conceivably, you can have a stack that looks like this. 3 squads, 1 leader, keeping it simple here on the ground level. And then on level 1, you have another 3 squads and a leader. And on the second level, you have another 3 squads and a leader. That's tricky to get them all in there. And imagine if you're playing the real game, how difficult it is. It's like almost stacking a deck of cards. Now, everybody that I know discourages stacking for very good reasons. And more or less, let's revert to a very simple example. And for this example, all we're going to do is explore this situation here. Let's put a couple of opposing units here. And a 9-1 leader. Now clearly these units are not stacked, but these fellows are not as well. Let's put these units aside. So in this case, in order to affect all these 3 squads, 1 squad will have to fire here, 1 will be leader directed and firing there. You're forcing your opponent to split his firepower. Now, if the Soviet player was stacked with 3 units, 3 squads in 1 hex, he effectively has a 8-up 2-shot against them, and he will affect all 3 units plus the leader. Similarly, if the enemy sniper is at play and the sniper hits this hex, then we're going with random selection to see which of these units the sniper ultimately selected, and if the opposing player rolls Yahtzee, then he just affected more than 1 squad. In other words, what you're trying to avoid is a turkey shoot or shooting fish in a barrel. That's what you're trying to avoid by not stacking. Now, as I said previously, there is a few detriments over and above this concept of the turkey shoot or shooting fish in a barrel that the rules kind of stipulate. So basically, let's have this situation here. So right now that hex is not overstacked. Let's put in one more squad in there by cloning them. All right, great. Now we have 4 squads and 1 leader. Let's say we have a unit here, and the unit here wants to move through this hex to get to Y4. In this case, as per alpha 511, since this stack is overstacked by one multi-man counter, there's an extra 1 movement factor penalty for moving through this hex. So normally, to move through this hex, it would cost you 2 movement points. But since it's overstacked by 1 multi-man counter, there's an extra movement factor that this unit has to expend in order to get there. So instead of being 2 to there, it will be 3, and then 4 or 5 late CX to get to there. So that penalty is increased by 1 movement factor per multi-man counter overstacked above the limit, fractions rounded up. Let's put this dude under CX. Now let's say they're overstacked in open ground, and the unit is here, wants to get to there. Ordinarily this would cost them 1. So basically what this simulates is a crowded hex. People have to scrounge around to get through one another. Instead of this squad incurring 1 movement factor to move into there, it'll be 2, 3 to there, and 4. Cost them 1 movement factor more. A friendly AFB incurs the same penalty. So 1 to start, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now on the other hand, if the overstacked hex was overstacked due to armored fighting vehicles, there is no penalty for the multi-man counter to go 1, 2, 3, and 4 to there. Additionally, going back to our first example, if I have a ordnance here to hit this hex, since they are overstacked, this fellow here will have, as per 5.1311. Now the previous penalties were due to movement. These are now penalties due to IFD, close combat, and 2 hit. Since this hex is overstacked, again, this fellow will enjoy a -1 to hit dice roll in addition to all the other factors to hit that hex. In other words, we're only 4 hexes away. The infantry target type is 8, +1 for being buttoned up, +3 for the terrain, and -1 because this hex is overstacked by 1 multi-man counter. Again, that -1 penalty is increased incrementally per unit, per squad equivalent overstacked. So if it was overstacked by 2 squads, it would be a -2 to the 2 hit dice roll. Now let's take a look at the charts and see if we can find that modifier on the 2 hit table. Here we go. Here are the charts right here. And ordnance to hit. And that would be not fire-based, but target-based hit determination DRM. Overstack personnel as per A5.131, -1 per overstack squad. Now, if I read the rule correctly, that -1 IFT should apply also on the IFT and in CC rolls. Let's go back to the chart. So in this case, the actual firepower he could exert on this hex would be 8, -1 to his for his leadership DRM, and -1 for the overstacked hex by 1 MMC. He would enjoy a 8 up 1 attack as opposed to an 8 up 2. Let's see if we can find that on the fire table as well. Yeah, I just saw it a moment ago. There, charts. Let's go to the IFT. Well, they don't list that in the IFT. CC though. Concealed, guarding, ambush, broken, capture attempt, withdrawing, overstacked per hex squad. It's a +1 overstack versus overstacked infantry -1. Wow. Wow. So now, why would you get into a situation like that, let's say? Well, I can imagine, I've never accomplished this, but I did manage to get into a close combat situation in X4 where I inadvertently overstocked, not knowing how many units were in that hex, and I wanted greatly to win the game. I was a little bit over exuberant and poured everybody in there for an all-in attack. I don't advise you doing that. Now, the other interesting situation is, we just said that AFVs can overstack. And this is where the thought bubble comes in to play. Does he really have lost there? And lo and behold, if you do the loss check, check that out. Boom, clean line of sight. Now what happens? Well, why do you get into that situation in any place? He probably got into that situation if he was able to enter anywhere along this side of the board, and he was probably expecting an ambush from this hex or that hex. So Kuba wagons and AFE advance into the woods. They take a block check. Everything's fine. Alternatively, the other thing this player could have done was going to bypass and state that I'm bypassing the woods, and he could have more than one unit in each hex side. But in this case, to keep it simple, everybody's overstacked in that hex. We do have line of sight. Now, another interesting rule that comes into play here is alpha 5.132. So, when this comes into play, is that I attempt to hit there. This is more or less the example right off the rule book. And I roll on the 2-hit table. I rolled a 6. I got the tank. Conceivably, I could have also have hit another vehicle. And as long as my 2-hit dice roll does not exceed the modified 2-hit number by the number of vehicles in that hex, I can do a subsequent DR. And if that DR was a 1 or 2, I could have conceivably also hit a Kuba wagon. And then you subsequently do another DR, small DR, and modify it by the reverse of the target size to find out if you actually hit that target. So that's what I probably mean by a turkey shoot, or shooting fish in a barrel, and that is what 5.132 is all about. Now, there are 2 other situations in the advanced game where you cannot overstack. So, for 1942 and later, and for, I believe, for the other nationalities, it's 1943 and later. So 42 for the Russians and 43 for everyone else. We have riders, passengers, and crew. So in this case, as per alpha 5.3, no overstacking is allowed. You cannot have 2 squads on a tank. And the other last item that you should know about is 4 entrenchments. Let's look at fortified. Here's a foxhole. Let's put him here. That's a 2-squad foxhole designated by the 2S. If I change its size, now I have 3 squads, 1 squad. In this case, only 1 squad can receive protection from fire because we have a 1S foxhole. And at this level here, at this point here, as per Alpha 5.61, foxholes and pillboxes can never be overstacked. So that is stacking 202 in a nice short summary. I have a good friend and acquaintance that earned the nickname Colonel Stackberg. Shout out to Ben. Thank you for watching, Ben. And Ben is a really nice guy. And I'll tell you what, I talked about the detriments of overstacking, but in some cases you do have to stack, and there are 2 cases applicable to that rule of thumb. And if ever you want to exert a good amount of firepower that the leader that will enjoy a good leader's benefit, and you need that firepower, then you have no choice but to stack. So in this case, let's get the overstacked unit out of there. A 12 up 2 is a far better shot than a 4 up 2, let's say. All right. The other instance where you would like to overstack is if you want to use a leader to basically be an effective source of transportation, then you can use a leader to move 3 squads up to the fullest extent possible. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Stops there unless he wants to go CX. As opposed to going CX with 1 unit at a time and going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and having everybody CX. Those are the 2 instances where I believe stacking could be justified. Is it the optimal strategy or tactic? Perhaps not, but in certain cases it has paid off, and in certain cases it really hasn't. So that's the short and tall of it. As you can see, we're getting a little bit technologically smart as we go along. We're reinforcing our ASL knowledge. I think this is good knowledge to have. And once again, I'd like to end the video by thanking all my viewers and subscribers. Do tell to your friends about this channel and my rambling and my thoughts. And there's a lot more good things to come up in terms of ARs and probably a year in review and my top plate scenarios. I hope you enjoyed this this video, and stacking 202. And take care. George, over and out.